And now,
ladies and gentlemen,
please fasten your seatbelts.
Welcome to PreneurCast.
You know, business cards being swapped, beers being drunk.
Can I say a nasty word? Can I say procrastination?
With Pete Williams and Dom Goucher.
How well did that go down?
We can talk about that entire thing in a very another rant and soapbox episode if we want to.
Visit us online at PreneurMarketing.com.
Hey, buddy.
Big fella, how are you?
Good, as usual.
Very good.
Or as they say here, phenomenal.
Phenomenal. Very nice, very nice. Let me ask you a quick question at the top of the show. Are you
Go
new
ahead.
and I'm noteworthy, or am I new and you're noteworthy? Because according to iTunes, we are new and noteworthy.
Awesome.
See what I did there? Did you get that?
That was an awesome segue into that,
Yeah.
and a little bit of an announcement.
Worked on it all day.
All day.
That was my bit. No, so yes, very exciting. We may as well sort of let the cat out of the bag a little bit. That one thing that we did do with this podcast is we actually recorded the first 8 episodes ourselves behind closed doors before we opened it up to anybody. So we didn't even put the feed together or submit it to iTunes or anything like that until the 8th episode. Is that correct, Mr. Tech Guy?
That is correct, sir.
So we'll go back and tell the why behind that in a moment. But so we submitted it to iTunes last week, and it's been good. You know, it's been a week being exposed, shall we say? And it's been very, very cool. A lot of great reviews. I think all the reviews so far have been 5-star, or at least all the ones I've seen, which has been fantastic. So I don't think we want to go down the path of this podcast having sponsors and stuff. So I think it's all driven by our ego. So the more 5-star reviews and comments people give is the more chance of us continually to do this without trying to sort of monetize or anything like that. So yeah, if you haven't given a review yet, we'd really, really appreciate you taking 13 seconds out of your day and just giving us a little review. We'll even settle for a 4-star review. But it's been really cool. So that's obviously driven the podcast to be featured under the new and noteworthy section.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, very cool. Very, very prominent placement inside the iTunes store, particularly in the business section and the management and marketing sections as well. So it's very good exposure. Hopefully that translates into new listeners. And if you're new, welcome on board.
Yes, welcome, one and all.
So one thing just on the whole iTunes stuff that's interested me that I wasn't aware of is that they keep each country's podcast area completely separate. Now, I knew they had different charts. I understood they had Australian charts and US-based charts and UK charts and all that sort of stuff because I've got an Australian and a US-based iTunes account. So I was aware of that. One thing I wasn't... So on that, we're actually featured in the new and noteworthy section in Australia and in the US. Are we in the UK at all? Do you know?
Do you know, I haven't looked today. I haven't looked.
Well, we'll actually come back to that again later on. I've got an idea of what I'll talk about today, and that'll tie back in nicely, which is actually kind of unique. So, a bit of an open loop for you NLP people out there. But one thing I found interesting is, I knew they had different charts, but they actually have different ratings. So, the ratings we're getting in the Australian store don't get shown in the US store, which I find very, very bizarre. Because it's the same podcast, so why wouldn't... I understand that the charts are different, but it's a review's a review.
No, social graph, mate, social graph.
Social what?
Ed, close your ears. Social graph. The effect of your social network on the information that you consume. It's more relevant to you that people in your geographical location find that podcast interesting. Therefore, those ratings are localized.
See, I get that for basing the charts. So I completely understand that the local ratings and the local listeners affect the chart status. But what I do find weird though is that when I actually go into iTunes and click on PreneurCast and go through to the actual podcast page of iTunes, the only reviews I see are the ones from the country I'm logged in at, which I find that part odd. I find that the algorithm and the social graph making the charts, that makes perfect sense to me. That's logical.
Yeah.
But not displaying the reviews across the globe, I find that unique.
Okay, I'm going to be really, really boring and mundane and drag up a little bit of my history here.
Okay.
From a programming point of view, and literally from a writing codes, writing programs, from that point of view, it's a lot easier if the only people that are allowed to put reviews into an area are the people that you're then going to use to work out the charts.
Fair.
So if they're only taking the data from Australia, then logically they'd only capture the data from Australia and only list the data from Australia. That is a much easier coding problem to solve.
Fair enough.
Pretty mundane, sorry about that, but it's like Amazon, although Amazon are spreading their reviews, I believe.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that. I'll stand corrected.
Yeah.
From a coding perspective, that's fine.
I'd rather be wrong, by the way.
From a user perspective,
I'd rather be wrong about
I would have thought, Apple have a few resources available. They're not sort of restricted. Anyway, soapbox. Get off it, Pete.
Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed, but they've been a little bit busy lately changing the world.
True.
Things like iPads and stuff.
Yeah, no, fair point. But in terms coming back to one of the earlier points about, I guess, the why we did the podcast the way we did, from my perspective, I wanted to make sure this is something that's going to stick. And I didn't want us to say, yeah, cool, new podcast, like so many people do. They record the first 2 or 3 episodes, and then for numerous reasons, they drop the ball. And I think this is just a lesson in terms of creation in general, whether you're trying to create a new blog. How many blogs are started? Like, here's an interesting fact. You know how there's the stats that sort of say, 1 in 3 businesses don't last beyond 3 years, or whatever sort of the crazy stats are. That it's probably even higher than that now, really. I wonder how many blogs don't last beyond 3 weeks, let alone businesses that last beyond 3 years. Because people sort of start something, they write 2 posts, and then the next shiny object comes along. And I guess we could easily go down that path in the conversation today, but the reason we tried to do this and actually create 8 episodes, so we did 8 weeks of ritualistic podcasting. And if you go back and listen to the previous episodes, which I hope you do and I encourage you to do, because there's definitely some episodes in there that I'm really, really proud of, that we actually spoke and act as if we already had an audience. So you'll hear stuff that we sort of reference things and say, make sure you go leave a comment or whatever it might be. And we try to do that to make sure we got in the habit of how we want to actually deliver the podcast from an actual, recording perspective of how we actually want to sound and communicate and talk, and make sure that you and I worked well and got the flow down pat. We also want to make sure we could be ritualistic, if you will, in terms of us showing up and making this happen, because as we've spoken about in previous episodes, half of the challenge of creating anything is showing up regularly and doing that. I actually had a coaching session today over lunch with some people, and they were sort of people I've known from a different world who want to sort of get into the what they refer to as internet marketing world, and I sort of very rightly gave them that backslap and said, there is no such thing as being an internet marketer. You are a marketer who happens to only have one path to market, being the internet. If you're advertising Yellow Pages, you're not calling yourself a Yellow Pages marketer. You call yourself a business owner. So I gave them that first backslap. And then secondly, I went on to explain to them that, look, to be successful in internet marketing or any sort of business, I think it really is about discipline, and that showing up regularly, doing your CFTs, and doing all that. So we tried to do that and make sure we had that process down pat, that's something we enjoyed doing, that we were going to continue doing, that we were proud of, that we could actually manage before we actually wanted to ship. I think shipping is important, but you want to make sure that you ship at the right time. So from my perspective, that's the reason we went down that path and had such a backlog of episodes when we actually launched. We backdated them and all that sort of stuff. So the podcast has been out for a week, even though there's, this is now the 10th or 11th episode. And thank you everyone so far who have given us fantastic reviews and helped us become new and noteworthy.
Indeed. Just to talk to a couple of those points, Pete. First of all, absolutely, let's look a little bit more about that, the habit forming.
Sure.
You're a busy guy. I'm a busy guy. We both have our own businesses. We both have our own little worlds, completely separate from each other. We live literally opposite sides of the globe.
Absolutely.
10 plus hours apart. So
I almost snuck in there and spoke about different hemispheres and weather, but I didn't want to drop the whole weather thing, because last episode we spoke about not talking about the weather anymore. So that's why I didn't mention that before.
I'm just going to keep going.
Cool.
just going to keep going. You're trying to drag me into that. I know you are. But yeah, we've got all these issues about being in the same place at the same time and getting this thing done. So, as you said, shipping is crucial, but shipping and then fading would have been worse. Putting your name on a product that then just drops off really wouldn't have been a good thing to do. Putting anybody's name on a product that just drops tails off, it's like launching a membership site and then not delivering any more content.
Exactly.
Exactly. So we needed to do that. We needed to know that we could, meet the commitment. And there were a couple of times when our schedules really didn't work out. Your little opportunity on the way to Bali, for example. Gave us a few challenges.
Gave you a few challenges. God, yeah. Anyway, we've spoken about that.
Yeah, folks. If you haven't seen the Bali edition, heard the Bali edition, pop back and have a listen to that one, and the one after it about failure. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we wanted to know that we could do this because once we'd shipped, we wanted to know that we could keep going. So we kind of had a dry run, but it wasn't because we were acting as if it was going to go live all the time. While we were ironing the kinks out of the technology in the background, getting all the processes and things sorted out, we were recording real content, which was great. Now, from a slightly geeky, more technical point of view, if you're going to do a podcast, folks, top tip. When you submit to iTunes, it really does help if there's something in your feed.
Yes.
They won't take a feed that's empty, so you may as well record at least one show and get it in there. The more the better, because they will look after you if you are shown to be a regular content producer, as we clearly are, and we benefited from that. Because they considered us for new and noteworthy.
Yes. And something interesting, actually, about this whole conversation we've had so far, which is not going to be the main focus that I wanted for tonight, but we can definitely continue down this path. But one of the things I found interesting in the last 36 hours, 48 hours, I've listened to two people that I really admire for two different reasons. One, Merlin Mann and his Back to Work podcast, which I really do enjoy. It's very, very ADD filled, but there's some actual gold in there if you sift through all the fun rocks and pebbles. And also John Mayer, who every year, or every last couple of years anyway, he's gone back to Berkeley in America, the college over there, and given a presentation about songwriting and being a songwriter as well as songwriting. And both of them, in two things I've listened to recently, and we're going to have an episode solely on John Mayer in a couple of weeks, which is going to be very, very cool. But in both of those things I listened to recently, they both gave advice similar to what we're talking about right now and what we did. And they were saying that, in Merlin Mann's case, he was saying write blog posts that don't actually get published to your blog. And John Mayer was saying write songs before you even tell anybody. And it's about locking yourself away and getting in that habit and getting in that flow of knowing how to create consistently. And I think it's very, very true that a lot of people don't do. They think they've got to ship straight away because, if you've been in the world that, you and I have been in the conversation and the community for the last 2 years, the conversation in the community in the marketing world has been all about shipping because no one spoke about it for the 2 years prior. And I think that pendulum's starting to shift a little bit again to make sure you ship. Don't not ship, but make sure you actually have a platform, a foundation, a history, a momentum coming with you as you actually start to ship. So that way that momentum can keep you going in the forward direction. Is that an analogy? Is that an analogy on an analogy that's confusing, or?
It's pretty clear. It's pretty stacked with analogies, but it's pretty clear. Pretty clear.
Very, very cool.
Okay, right. And I'm gonna join all these things together and bring in a completely random reference and just see how many people we can lose with this one. Are you aware of the author Terry Pratchett?
No.
Fictional author, very famous English guy.
I haven't
published
read a fiction book since I was in the equivalent of what would have been year 8 or 9 like not 89 9 years old, but like, what's that?
Yeah.
Junior high. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. When I was in senior high school, I just bought the audiobooks of the versions we had to read for studying. I listened to the audiobooks. I kid you not. I remember lying in the bath at home and just with a tape cassette player. This is back, prior to CDs, books on tape, and listen to the books. Didn't have double speed or 2-speed back then, unfortunately, but just listen to them in 1 speed as opposed to reading.
Okay, excuse me a minute. Geek. Sorry. Anyway, Terry Pratchett, very famous fictional author in the UK, writes science fiction, fantasy, incredibly humorous, really well observed.
Terry,
humor.
yeah. Born, what's his birthday? April 28th. Yeah, Terry, yeah.
Has a character in there called Mrs. Cake, and Mrs. Cake has a problem, which is that she's psychic. She knows what you're going to say, but if you don't say it, it gives her a headache.
What crap do you let? Okay, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so she knows what you're saying, but if you don't...
You really need to tell us what your main thread was going to be before you give me a headache.
That's an analogy on an analogy.
Yep.
So, yeah, Terry, great guy. He sold 65 million books worldwide in 37 languages. Yeah, Terry, yeah.
And I didn't hear you type that into Google at all.
So, yes, main thread. What I was thinking we could talk about is numbers. We could use words verbally on a podcast to talk about numbers. And the reason I'm thinking or wanting to have a chat about this is a couple of reasons. Just, numbers are important. Numbers can be scary, but numbers are very, very important. And, knowing your numbers is a thing that a lot of people talk about in the world of marketing. You have to know your traffic numbers. You have to know your conversion numbers. You have to know what your sales team convert at. You have to know what your profit is. You have to know numbers, and it can be very, very scary. But I think what I would love to chat about is what numbers are the right numbers, and how to do some division to divide up your numbers into the right areas. Because one thing that we have started to do a little bit over in my Infinity world, in my the telco world and my real world business world, is we've got, over the last 5 or 6 years, we've built up a very, very good marketing team. We've got quite a number of people in our marketing team, from copywriters to SEO and SEM to designers and developers and coders and all that sort of stuff. We've got a very, very solid team. And we decided, for numerous reasons, which I won't bore you all with today, to actually take on a couple of select clients and actually do some website development work for them. We've got sites who are, all our sites are fundamentally one of the biggest drivers of new inquiries to our businesses, the multi-million-dollar business that we have. And so we know exactly what to do when it comes to building websites that convert and that get traffic from AdWords and SEO and all that sort of stuff. So we thought, well, look, we've got this amazing skill set here. We know what works online. Let's actually help some clients. Now, we don't want to create a huge web development business or anything like that. Just a few select clients that we can work with that will stimulate us, allow us to test new things, that we can see help, we can grow their businesses. Some of the stuff we've been looking at, we're doing some JV sort of stuff as well, but that's a whole other conversation. And if anyone's interested in sort of having that conversation, feel free to shoot an email over to support@preneurgroup.com. Happy to have a chat about that at some point. But one thing we've been having a conversation recently, back and forth with for want of a better term, a prospect, someone who's potentially looking at taking on our web development services and doing something together. And just through the conversation with them, it's been interesting. They're smart business owners, but they just aren't looking at the right numbers the right way. So I thought we could basically discuss and dissect a recent email that I sent across to them, basically trying to get them to open their eyes up and point them in the right direction and make sure they're looking at the right numbers so they can make smart decisions, educated decisions with the correct data. Is that fair? Does that sound too scary? Is that good?
Well, it's a big old topic, but I think it's a fantastic one. I mean, as you highlighted a very simple example of people needing to know their stats and needing to know the conversions and things like that, which is common in the internet marketing world specifically. But yeah, I mean, very few people really know what numbers to look at and how to look at them. So I think it's fantastic.
Oh, absolutely.
Go ahead.
And very few people really know and take pride and really want to know where they rank in iTunes as well, particularly in their local country as well. So that's, yeah.
Don't you dig at me just because my ego's nowhere near as big as yours. I just haven't looked this morning.
I'm closing that loop from before. You said you hadn't checked where we were in the UK, so I just, Anyway, so back on topic.
Quickly.
Anyway, okay. So look, I'll try and read the email and not be too. Well, it's not going to be. No one's going to have an idea who this business is, which is great. But I had a conversation. They tested some. They've never done AdWords before. They built a very successful business up, and they did some recent testing with AdWords. And they came back and said in one conversation that they didn't think AdWords was going to work for them. Now, I had nothing to do with the AdWords campaign. Someone I know was involved, helping him out a little bit, giving some advice in that regard, and I trust him very. He's a brilliant guy when it comes to AdWords, so I knew he looked after them correctly. And what they came back to me was saying is basically, in one conversation, they were saying their website currently converts at 6%. So let's say their website converts at 6%. Now, there's a whole other conversation around a conversion rate of a website at 6%, and we'll touch on that if we get time to in part 2 of this conversation. So that was one part of a conversation we had. They don't feel they need to do certain things because their site's converting at 6%. So let's just take that for granted, and we'll, again, touch on it later. Another part of the conversation, they said, is that they had an additional 800 visitors to their site with this AdWords test. But they didn't think it would work to continue going on. So I sort of, putting those two numbers together, I basically wrote, this is the part 1 of the email. I'm surprised the numbers are not working for you. Based on a 6% conversion rate, the additional 800 visitors due to AdWords should have given you an extra 48 new sales. 800 visitors at a 6% conversion rate, 48 new sales. I hope my math is right. I also then went on to say, I'm also guesstimating here, obviously, but given most of your business is repeat customers, as you've mentioned before, because in previous conversations they said a big chunk of their business is from repeat clientele. So based on a business which has historically been built to a very significant number based on repeat customers, you can easily assume that the lifetime client value should be at minimum $100 profit for every new customer they got. So, look at a lot of businesses that could be a lot higher, a lot lower, and that's where you start looking at lifetime value of a client, which is something we won't get into, but if you've studied marketing and you've sort of been in this marketing community for a while, you'll know that, lifetime value is important. It's not about the first sale necessarily that the client makes. It's how much they spend with you over a lifetime. So let's just say this was able to give them $100 profit over the life of a client. So that increase of 800 new visitors should have given them around $4,800 worth of new business over the lifetime of those new clients. So you may get 800 new visitors to your website today, and of that 800, over the lifetime of them interacting with you, you're going to get about $5,000. And I said, basically, am I close here? Because, that would equate to basically $6 of revenue for every visitor your site gets. If you're getting $4,800 worth of revenue, or profit actually, $4,800 worth of profit to your business based on 800 original visitors. 800 visitors come in, 6% of them convert. That number of conversions spend $100, $4,800. Backwards math at $6 per visitor. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So far, which I think is excellent. If every visitor who comes to your website gives you $6, that is very, very cool. Particularly if your AdWords costs are less than $6. If you hypothetically can have an AdWords cost where your average cost per click is $5 and your revenue per visitor is $6, you're making $1 profit off every visitor to your site. Right? So why would you not do it? Is that fair?
To me, yes.
Okay, so that was the first part. Just to sort of get them to think about, hang on, sit down for a moment and do your numbers. Because, making decisions off, hey, this could be quite an expensive AdWords campaign, or not really knowing the full, actually breaking it down and doing those numbers, if that 6% conversion rate is true, very, very silly decision to not do what they were going to do. So I just want to sort of have that, because it's basically why knowing numbers is so important, so you can make decisions like that. So that's a very rudimentary, entry-level conversation. Hopefully a lot of people, if you've been around business, you kind of know that that's important and you know of the concept. And you go, yeah, I know that. But I guess the first question is, have you actually sat down and done your numbers properly? Have you really sat down And it can be scary because you might not want to know the number, which is why people avoid doing it. But it's really, really important. Part 1 over. Any comments, Dom? Any feedback?
That's a really good break point for part 1, and I think we're going to come back to this one based upon other people's feedback. But mine, absolutely. I've seen even the most basic people focused absolutely on the internet marketing stalwarts of what's your AdWords click through, what's your conversion rate on the site, etc., fail when asked that basic question. Anyone that's been to one of Ed Dale's challenge conferences and seen Robert Somerville, the
Simon Cowell.
Simon Cowell. Yes, Rob Somerville, the Simon Cowell of internet marketing. When he puts that steely glare on anyone who puts their hand up and says, "What are your numbers?" They go,
"Yes, yes."
And that's the most basic.
Does Rob drive a Phantom?
I think it's possible he drives a Prius.
True, quietly.
But those are the most basics. But I think you've really raised an important thing, which is people get focused on there's an old joke. It's a mother-in-law joke, which is about the mother-in-law who read in the highway code, always check your rear-view mirror before pulling out. Unfortunately, the highway code doesn't say what you do if there's something coming. A lot of people follow blindly or look for a blueprint, look for if you have this conversion on your AdWords, it will be great, and all that. But they don't really understand what goes into those numbers, where those numbers came from. And I think what you've raised here is really, really good because it's saying, look at it in context and also add that lifetime value of the client into there. Really look at what you're talking about. Don't just look at one number, but look at the impact for your business. Conversion 6%, some people would say great, some people would say not so great.
Well, this
Additional 800 visitors to the site, a lot of people would say thank you very much.
Yes.
And so I think it's a really good thing to look into some more because I know that this is one of the things that you do look into. The face value of whatever is out there is something that you pretty much just go, yeah, okay, and then you start looking properly.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And this is where it moves to part 2. I'm going to go into it now. I know you're probably sort of saying, we should stop this, which is fair because we're getting half an hour, but I think people have iPads and iPhones and stuff. They have a pause button, so let's give them some power because I want to keep going. Because I went on to start challenging some of their beliefs and their assumptions. Because I basically literally went on to say, okay, now I've got 2 other questions I really want to chat about. Firstly, the 6% conversion rate that you mentioned, is that on all traffic to the site or just first-time visitors? Because it's the first-time visitor percentage that we should really be focusing on. Once someone's come to this site and chosen to spend money with you, of course repeat customers are going to convert at a much higher rate as they know the product, the service, and the website experience. If they've gone to the trouble of using this website, which has... Let me sort of verbalise the process of purchasing on this e-commerce site. You click a couple of buttons and you find yourself on a product page. You click Add to Cart. A pop-up warning, not a website-based pop-up, a browser pop-up. The OK cancel type windows that pop up
Ooh.
And say your item has been added to your cart. You click OK. You're still on the same page. You then have to click the cart button in the top of the navigation to get to the cart to go through the checkout process. You then click the checkout button on the final checkout page. Another pop-up pops up. Thank you for confirming your checkout. You'll now proceed to credit card statement part. And then you're going to put your credit card details in and then you go through the rest of the purchasing. It's just not a user-friendly, slippery slope type checkout process. So,
wow.
That's the reason I initially was like, this can't convert at 6%, there is no way. But, so people in this scenario, if they've gone through that process historically and have, done all that, and the product's amazing and their customer service is amazing. So if someone's got to that point and historically gone through the product, done the service, done the website experience, they're definitely going to convert at a higher rate. And they always will. Repeat customers will always convert at a higher rate because they know the experience. So basing your business decisions on an overall site conversion rate is very, very silly, because you want to eliminate that from a decision-making process about what form of lead generation should I use in my business, and is this lead generation viable? Whether it's AdWords to your website, whether it's radio, TV to your retail store, whether it's direct mail for people to call up and inquire about your business, you have to isolate those as their own unique data, because you don't want repeat business to scuff those numbers. So that was the first thing, is that we have to really make decisions based on. One of the things that their decision-making process was based on is that, well, our site's converting at 6%. We can wait a little bit before we change the website. And I'm basically saying to them, I would bet houses on your website for new visitors, first-time traffic does not convert at 6%. I'm actually surprised their repeat visitors convert at 6%. Yeah. And they just couldn't get that because they just didn't have that. They didn't divide their numbers up. They didn't do their math and actually delve into it properly. So that was one of the. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's a fantastic point. That is a fantastic point, and I mean that's a really, really good example, because their site is in the website design world, with the highfalutin terminology I'm going to lay down on you. We'd call that a brick wall site.
Yes.
Because they get to it, and it's like hitting a brick wall.
Yeah, and it still works for them, and they're doing very, very well. And then so that was the first main point I wanted to make. The first one was sort of just a bit of hopefully a polite backhand to them, saying, hey guys, just realise, do your numbers properly, because if 6% was true, you're making a silly decision by not doing AdWords because of those numbers I did earlier. Then my next point, where I really wanted to sort of question them, was, do you really think it is actually a 6% converting site based on what I just spoke about? And then I went on to sort of give them the second push, inquiry, thought-provoking idea, for want of a better term. I went on to sort of write then, okay, so when it comes to a new site, the two elements you really need to look at, whether it's with us or someone else, because I don't really care if this person does a website with us or not. I think we could do a great job, and I think it'd be very, very profitable for all parties involved. But they came from a referral from a good friend of mine. I know they've worked with other people I know, so I just want to see this person actually succeed because of people I know have helped them before and all that sort of stuff. So. And they mentioned they've got some other quotes a lot cheaper. I said, look, I don't think that quote's going to give you what you want, but if you're going to do that, by all means, here's some free advice. And the advice was this, twofold. If you're going to build a new site, the two elements they really need to look at. What are they doing to increase the average sales value of existing clients' repeat orders? So obviously they're saying a lot of their business is coming from repeat clients. So in this new shopping experience, this new website they're going to build, what are they going to do to increase the average value of existing clients and their repeat orders? So things like, what sort of upsells are they going to have in the checkout process? So rather than having a pop-up saying, hey, thanks, your item's been added to cart, if you're going to do a pop-up, the pop-up should say, hey, did you know that if you buy this, you're going to get this as a bonus for half price? Do you want to actually change your order to include this additional item at only 20% more? Save a total of 60%, or whatever it might be. What sort of cross-sells can they do? So again, throughout the checkout process or on the actual product page, can they have, this is the product you're looking at, but underneath it, popular solutions is this and this. Think Amazon. Everyone's experienced Amazon. You're on a books page, directly underneath the book and directly underneath the add to cart button, they've got, this book is commonly bought with this book. Buy these two books together, you get a discount. Cross-sells, bulk orders in that checkout process to actually increase the sales value for existing repeat orders. Yes, that does work for new orders as well, but specifically if we're going to divide up the client base into two parts, two little buckets, and the bucket is repeat customers, because in this scenario, that was the majority of their business. Upsells, cross-sells, bulk order checkout things is really, really important, because the easiest and most effective way to increase the revenues from existing clients is through this. The core focus shouldn't be on increasing conversion rates of existing clients, but increasing the revenue per sale. Because if their 6% conversion rate is highly weighted towards repeat clients, that's still a pretty good conversion rate. So they shouldn't be trying to focus on increasing the conversion rate necessarily for repeat clients. It's definitely a secondary focus, but in my opinion, in this scenario, based on these numbers that I had available, I'd be focusing on increasing the revenue from these existing clients, the revenue per sale for their repeat purchases, to increase that lifetime value. So that was the first sort of thing I wanted to put in front of them to consider. And then the second part of it was, I think, based on what I kind of have previously spoken about, I think there was room for increased conversions based solely on first-time visitor data. And this is where I sort of went to a bit more technical stuff. They need to actually filter out and create filters inside analytics, because it's an e-commerce-based site. And for those of you who aren't familiar with analytics and don't have it on your website, really just go and do it through Google. It's a free service and it gives you a lot of data. And what you can do is you can create filters. This is something a lot of people don't realize. You can create an overall filter. So when you're actually looking at your analytics account, normally when you look at your data in terms of traffic sources and keywords and time on page and bounce rates, it's based on all traffic. What you can actually do is you can create filters. So, and you can put a filter around all the data. So you can say, I want to filter out all of my reports based on first-time clients, first-time visitors. So you exclude anybody who's been to your site before. So that way, when you're making decisions based on first-time users, you're only looking at data based on first-time users. So that way, the bounce rates, the sales conversions, the traffic data is all based on this first-time visitor stuff, because it's this data that is going to show you how and where your business can grow from new clients and increase conversions. And I went on to say, I don't like to be blunt, but I'd be very surprised if the conversion rate for your first-time visitors is at 6%. And then, I sort of went on to sort of taper it a little bit, and, you really need to look at these two things in isolation and not confuse the stats. It's very easy to mix and match the conversion rates of repeat buyers and first-time visitors. And this is the lesson I hope people take away from this numbers thing is, looking at numbers is important. And you've got to look at it regularly. If you sort of speak to any successful business person, they know their numbers. Whether it's traffic data, conversion data, how many sales calls their cold calling sales room makes every day, what the conversion rates are, they know their numbers. But it's also actually to know your numbers in the right isolation and through the right filter, the right analytics filter, or the right high-level filter as well, to sort of say, okay, I'm looking at the business through this filter right now. How can I increase revenues from existing clients? How can I increase conversions from first-time visitors into my business? Whether it's a sales pitch and train your sales staff differently, whatever it might be, you have to have the right filters when looking at the numbers and divide it properly. There you go. Case closed, Your Honour.
Oh, awesome. End of today's lecture. Oh, man, I tell you what, there's going to be some serious forehead slapping going on around the listeners on this thing.
I hope so.
I mean, I would hope that people know a lot of what you just said, but if they don't, I think what you've just put across is probably one of the most valuable things people are going to hear, certainly this week. So many people will just wander in and take their overall conversion and go, hey, my site converts at whatever, But it's absolutely vital that they know what they're looking at and that they, as you say, they put it through the right filters. And if nothing else, that one client would benefit from the second point you made, which is, segment out who are your new users, visitors, and who are existing or repeat customers, because that would give him a real number to base his decisions on.
Exactly right. That's all it's about. Making educated decisions with the right numbers. And look, maybe we're not the right people for these guys because we're not cheap. We are definitely going to be at the higher end of the price point because we know our stuff. How many web design companies can actually sit there and say, we make websites for ourselves that make millions of dollars a year worth of revenue and generate millions of dollars worth of leads? Not many web design companies can do that. So that's how, we take that sort of premise when we are talking to clients and we're like, well, you're coming to us because we have runs on the board with our own sites. So you got to pay for it. So we're definitely not, we're not going to do a $2,000 website. But yeah, I don't know what the context of that statement was. I'm sure I had a point when I started making it, but it was basically saying that we might not be right for these guys because we're going to be expensive. So even if they choose someone else, make sure that they're making the decisions around this and you're doing the new website for the right reasons with the right data.
I think to go where I think you were going with this, look, yeah, I mean, anybody who has the money, this is a no-brainer. Let's look at any two web design companies. There's a web design company with some really good pencil crayon jockeys that make really shiny graphics. And then there's this guy over here that has $1 million websites who will let you use his team. That's a no-brainer if you've got the money. But what I think where you were going with this is you've given two pieces of knowledge here right now, and that knowledge taken anywhere, including on your own, going back to your analytics settings or no analytics if you've got no analytics. You install analytics, you go to the analytics panel, and you press the segment. That doesn't cost any money. That's not a multi-tens of thousands of dollars implementation of a website. That's just business intelligence, and that's free.
Do you know what it does cost, though? Guts.
Oh.
And what I mean by that, this episode is going to go forever. I hope people don't press pause and kind of listen through. But if you need to press pause, press pause. I won't go for too much more. But when I say guts is, and I have been guilty of this so many times, but I think one of the reasons that I've had the level of success, for want of a better word, that I've had is that I keep pulling myself up on it, and I keep trying and pushing to continue to do this as best I can. And I think we do it pretty well. But it takes the guts to sort of look at raw numbers. Because when you're looking at raw numbers in a business, there's nothing to hide behind. There's not a shiny brochure and say, look, this is what we created this week. We did this nice little brochure. There's not a nice little sales letter. There's not a nice new product you've built. There's not a nice new process for implementing customer service to hide around and sort of pat yourself on the back with. The raw numbers can be scary. And I think a lot of people don't actually want to look at it because of what might be there. So I think there is a price to pay to actually do this. And it doesn't cost money to actually do this, because you can do a lot of this yourself, as you rightly said. But I think it takes guts. And it's a pretty big payment a lot of people aren't willing to make. That's a whole other episode.
Definitely. That reminds me very much of the older problem that takes guts to admit, which is revenue versus profit. So many people are happy to tell you, hey, I sold this many units, I've made this much, my company turned over this much. It's like, yeah, okay, but how much profit did you make?
Yep.
And this is one of those. I've been rereading the 4-Hour Work Week this week.
Tim's coming to Australia, which is exciting. Tim's finally getting on a plane and coming down here to hang with all of us, and I think he's doing a presentation in Melbourne in October. So for the Australian listeners, awesome. We'll put a link in the show notes to where you can go and grab tickets and stuff, which is going to be pretty cool.
But it's pretty much the same conversation. Revenue versus profit, overall conversion versus new conversions. It takes guts to look at it that, excuse the pun, analytically, and admit it. And so. Hopefully, what we've done here is I say sometimes is I think we may have pulled a pin out and thrown one over the wall. Yeah. So hopefully, in the next few weeks, maybe you can tell people some things they can do when they find out that their new visitor conversion isn't quite so high.
We'll get on to productivity. We'll actually start giving some productivity tips and some actionable stuff as well. So let's definitely go into that, because I think across the analogies you just gave, there's also really looking at yourself and saying, am I being busy or am I being productive? And again, it's a very big distinction people don't really make. I've got lots to do, I'm busy, but are you being productive? So let's leave it at that. And in the next couple of episodes, let's delve into that productivity side of stuff and actually getting things done.
Awesome, mate. We are, again, way over our original time, although I'm seriously considering changing the allocated time, because these ones that go over, they just always seem to go over because the content that you're putting across, the information is just brilliant.
Do we have an allocated time? Is there like a...
We try to keep it to half an hour, mainly because I get bored after half an hour listening to other people's stuff.
Ooh. Okay.
But so far, as you say, we're getting 5-star reviews and people are saying the content's fantastic, so... Maybe in the comments, folks. Maybe in the comments, give us some feedback. Let us know if you want us to go on longer, if it's okay as it is, and definitely some feedback about the topic of numbers.
Absolutely,
because it's a big thing.
And again, if you don't want to, for whatever weird reason, write a comment, give us a tweet, give us a Facebook share, let people know about it, because obviously the more they know about it, the more feedback we have, and that also, it's obvious, I don't think we need to sort of, people who are listening to this are marketers and business owners, and they know how important feedback is and ratings are and all that sort of stuff. So I really do hope that the people are getting value from this, and happy to sort of, in exchange for our 45 minutes of ranting and raving, they will give us 10 or 15 seconds back in a comment. So.
And just to close the final loop on this one, Pete, I think really you're noteworthy because I'm pretty new. See, it took me all day to figure out my little intro. That took you 45 minutes. That's awesome. See you next week. See you next week, mate.
You've been enjoying another fine episode of PreneurCast with Pete Williams and Dom Goucher. Make sure to hang out with the boys online at www.preneurmarketing.com or drop them a line via PreneurCast@preneurgroup.com.